So I'm making this video because I do stuff like this all the time, and I just thought it'd be worth documenting. Maybe someone else might want to try the same thing. Basically, I've got these headphones, Sennheiser HD25s, and this is actually a second cable that I've bought from off the internet. Now, I've had these for probably 5 years, and I've had no problems with them really, using them like every week, except this original cable. I was getting some issues where these connections that go into the actual earpieces, which is, you can see up here, like one ear would cut out and I would wiggle this around a little bit and it would come back on. So every week wrapping them up and stretching the cables and stuff, it might have just made the inside of the cables a bit brittle. So I bought this replacement one, which works fine, but I just don't like this connector on the end of it because it's straight like this and it just sticks out really far. The original one is a right angle like this, which is really good because when it's plugged in, you can't sort of accidentally bend it or anything, which I much prefer. And this one, it sort of like sticks out a lot further, and especially if it's something, you know, near your legs or something, it's easy to clip it. So I don't really like this. I really wanted to make a custom cable with whatever color I wanted and this right angle connector on it. The only thing is you can't buy these connectors as like a solderable DIY thing. You can see that it's just like this end part, it can't be removed or anything, it's just permanently on there from the factory. So you need to find a DIY version of this. And I've got this one here. So this is a DIY version, and you can unscrew the back of it. And you can see inside it, it has the different terminals that you can solder to. The only problem with this is that it's just a 1/4 inch or 6.5 mil, which is fine for most mixers, but with the Sennheiser ones, you can actually unscrew this and it's got a 3.5 mil connector in there as well, which you can plug into a phone or another kind of mixer or whatever else you want. And after searching on the internet for ages, I couldn't find a DIY version of this with the adapter. So I've come up with a different idea. I'll have this connector on the end, this one that I bought, because it's metal and it's nice and solid, and it's right angle so it stays out of the way. And within the cable, as in somewhere along the length of the cable, I'm going to have a connection which has a 3.5 mil connector. And I was going to buy a solderable version of that and then buy some cable and solder that onto the cable, but then I realized that if I need a male and a female to plug into each other, then I can just buy something like this, which is a headphone cable or extension cable, and it already has a male and female can plug into each other. So all I have to do here is have this as my cable going to the headphones and cut this end off. So this is just the connector end, and have this like soldered onto the end of that, right? So that's just a small section, and then the other section, which has this on the end, will plug into that, and then the open end will plug into the headphones. The headphones have to have 2 cables, one to go to each side, and they're individually shielded, so I'm just going to use a section of this cable. The difference with audio cables compared to electrical cables, you call it a positive and negative. In audio you have a signal and a ground. So for each ear, because it's stereo, each ear has its own signal, and on these cables, inside this, it has the signal and then a shield around it, and the shield is the ground. So when you connect that shield to the negative, it shields the signal cable from any like radio interference or something, because a cable can act like an antenna if it's not shielded. So these two, they both have 2 pins. One is for the signal and one is for the ground. And then along the cable, it's kind of just like 2 wires just attached to each other. But these left and right can actually share the same shield. In this cable, for example, it has a left and right, but it's just in the one shield. So they share the same common ground. So all I have to do is cut the end off this and then have 2 wires, signals will connect to the 2 individual signals inside this cable. And then the 2 shields of this will connect just to the one shield of this, and it should work exactly the same. Now these connectors are also just fixed on there from the factory, and I actually happened to find a set of these connectors on eBay that can be soldered on DIY. So I'm going to try and use these, but if I can't get them to work, then I'll actually just cut off the individual cables from this cable that I bought on eBay. But I will try to use these because they look a lot nicer, I think. So yeah, that's basically what I need to begin with, is this this existing cable, just for the individual parts to go to the ears. This headphone extension cable, which is going to be the main cable. Some heat shrink to cover up the connections after you've soldered them so that they don't touch each other. I started living in Germany, so I've had to buy a soldering iron. So I've just bought this little gas soldering iron, some gas. Yeah, that's it. Soldering it really isn't too hard. A lot of people probably learnt to do it a little bit in physics or something in high school, but if you haven't done it, don't be terrified of it. It's something you can learn pretty easily on YouTube. So I need to decide how much length I want on the adapter part of it, this section here. I mean, if it's too long, it's just going to mean that when you plug in with the 3.5mm, it's going to make the cable a lot shorter. So I don't want to affect the length of the cable too much when I change from 3.5 to 6.35. So I think I'll just cut it around that long. So I'm just going to use scissors. So you can see I'm just taping up the end because this red stuff is going to fray a lot. If you've got wire strippers, it's going to be a lot safer, but you can sort of just lightly run a knife around it. And then if you fold it, or bend it I should say, try and get this on camera. So usually the first thing you'll hit is the shield. So the other wires should be protected from the knife, but you've just got to be careful not to cut into the signal wires because you don't want them to touch each other. At that point I can just pull this off. Now if I separate this, all these little strands of copper are the shield. So I've just got to peel them away. So I'm just twisting the loose wires around the edge, which is the shield. I'm just twisting them together. This cable actually has 3 signals inside it. So if you've got a headset which has the left and right ears and also the microphone. So on the connector you've got 3 individual rings. So you've got signal, 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 then ground. Left, right, and microphone, or potentially microphone, left, right, whichever order you want. For this, I'm only going to use 2. So what I'll probably do is connect these 2 together so that they just act as one. So I've got to figure out which color wire corresponds to this end tip and which color corresponds to these 2, and then the shield is the last one. So the process of figuring out how to identify these wires is a little bit convoluted, but I can explain it. The easiest way to do it would be with a multimeter and set your multimeter to continuity, and every time you get a connection it'll beep. What I did was took my headphones, just had the 3.5mm connector, put the headphones on, and then I've got my other cable here plugged into my computer playing music, and then I've got these 2 wires. So one of them, this is for the right ear. All that matters is that we've got some audio signal coming out of this. So to test what the headphones do, firstly I know that there's a big pin and a small pin on these little connectors, and from looking at these ones that I bought on eBay, the fatter pin is the negative and the small one is the positive. Positive meaning signal. I know that the small one needs to be the ground, and I know that this bottom ring on this thing is the ground. I just didn't know which one's the left and right here. Touch them like this to the middle ring and to the ground, and I was getting signal in the right ear. So that tells me that this middle is the right signal and the end is the left signal. And just to double check that, if I touch the 2 signal wires, so the left and the right, I'm actually getting signal in both earphones, and that's not the way that they're meant to operate, but that does prove that these are the left and right. So the end I know is the left and the middle is the right. Now that's for the existing cable that I have. So I just wanted to verify that's how this one works. For this, I needed to work out what these colors represent in terms of the left, the right, and the ground. And in this case, it has 3 signals, so one of them will be for the microphone. So what I did is plugged my headphones into this, and then with this red cable here, I could touch these wires onto the different pins in different combinations to figure out what they were. I was assuming that the ground of this would be connected to the ground of this. So I was touching the ground onto the large pin and testing the different wires, and I found that none of the combinations were doing anything. And then I realized that because on this 3-pole connectors, the section which would normally be the ground is divided into the ground and the third signal, which is, I'm assuming, for the microphone. But this connector is only contacting a certain part of this other connector. So what I mean by that is if I touch this white cable here, which is a signal cable, onto the negative, and then touch the red onto the positive, I was finding that that was giving me signal in the left ear. And if I touched the white onto the negative and the blue onto the positive, that was giving me signal in the right ear. That tells me that this white one is connecting to the ground on this, to the headphones, and that the ground wasn't. But what I can do is just solder those two together because they fill the space of the ground on the normal pin. Basically, on this one, the bottom one is the ground. This one here is the white. On this side, that's just one solid thing. So if I connect those two together, it's the same as this solid thing. Then the blue one is this middle one, and the red one is this top one. Okay, so now I know white and ground will be the ground, red will be the left signal, and blue will be the right signal. If I open this up, you can see it's got these two tabs and this bracket at the bottom. Now I just know from using these before that this middle one, the top one, sorry, is connected directly to this tip we know now is going to be the left ear signal. The second tab is connected to this middle ring here, which is going to be our right ear. So this bracket actually connects to this section of the plug, which will be our shield. So I've got this little section of wire now, and I know that the white and the shield need to connect to this bottom part. I know that this red one needs to connect to this top part, and I know that this blue one needs to connect to this. What I'm going to do is just put them through these holes and wrap them around, get the soldering iron hot and get them ready to solder. I'm actually going to put the heat shrink tube on here first. That's something that you always forget to do when you're doing these things, because once it's soldered on, obviously you can't put the heat shrink on there. So you've always got to remember, before you do any soldering, get the heat shrink on there. It would be nice to have some individual heat shrink for each of these wires too, but I've only got these big ones, so if I have to separate them, I'll put some electrical tape in there. This plastic sleeve that comes with it goes over this, so that also needs to go. And actually this metal casing on the back needs to go on there too, so I'll do it in order. So this goes on there. And this tape I've put here to hold on to the fabric. I'll probably just leave that there because I think that this metal will cover it. I've got this just sitting in this set of pliers with some blue tack in there. Another good trick is to wrap an elastic band around them just to hold tension on there, just so it doesn't fall over. I've just put my red wire through the signal because that's the furthest one in, so I'm going to do that one first. Because these wires are so fine, I don't want to melt too much of the rubber or anything. Alright, I've got my second wire just wrapped on there, so now I'm going to put some solder on that as well. Okay, that should be fine. And there's no hole in this for the ground to go through, so I kind of just have to press it down. The red's going to here, the blue's going to here, and it doesn't look like anything's touching, so hopefully I won't have to put too much tape in there. Because this is a larger piece of metal too, it'll take a lot longer to heat up, and it needs to heat up for the solder to stick, so it's normal that it takes a bit longer. Okay, that looks like connected all the way across. Before I close anything up, I'm just going to plug it in like this just to test that the audio works. If you look up online, left, right, stereo test on YouTube or something, there's videos that test that you've got the left and right around the right way. It'll just play a sound through each signal and it'll show you which side it is. So I'm watching, it says left, right, and I can hear it in my ears. So I know it's working, and there's no interference between the two, because if any of the cables were accidentally touching each other, I would hear the left in both ears, and I would hear the right in both ears. But I'm not getting that, so it seems like this has worked fine. I've just got to close it up and make it neat. So this crimp thing here, fold these parts up. I'm going to put some tape in there just in case, because sometimes as these things move around, you know, they can eventually start touching each other, and just don't want that to happen. So I'm going to put some tape over the ground. The tricky thing with these tiny wires is it's hard to tell if, you know, if you've accidentally melted a spot in the rubber around the wire or something like that. Sometimes it's nice to get some tape in between the wires. You could do this with heat shrink as well, but I just don't have any. So I've got that one covered up. I'd like to put a little bit of tape in between the blue and red wires. You probably can't see it, but they are touching each other, and just in case there's any melted spot on the rubber or something, I'm just going to do that. Just going to stop them from touching each other. So now I put this in between here, put the heat shrink like this. Do it with a soldering iron, or you can do it with a lighter or whatever. So I'm just going to do it with the lighter. The reason why it's better to do it with a soldering iron is because sometimes the lighter makes it go black, because it's like burning it with gas. If you sort of just do it on the side and don't hold it in the one spot for too long, it's okay. Then you just got to fold these metal crimp tabs down, and you can squeeze them with the pliers. Just close that down onto the heat shrink. Push this down, slide the plastic over the whole thing and over that cap which goes on the top. Then this part just slides over the back and screws into the two. And that's it. So now that adapter part should work. Headphone jack. And that's working perfectly. So that's the first part done. Now, this cable, and I've got to get some pieces of this wire from the ends to separate to the headphones. I'll solder the two pieces onto here and these connectors. Just for those who don't know, to disassemble these headphones, you can basically just pull these out of the top of the cups. They can be kind of tough. So if you pull both of them out, then you've got this little clamp box thing. So you just got to undo the two screws on it, and that comes off, and then the cable's free. Split apart the strap and you can see the cable is running through it. Basically you just peel it out and that's it. You've got the blank headphones like that, and these can come off as well. I've just cut a section from that cable that I bought on eBay, just this long, to make the individual sections. You can see it's actually two wires stuck together, and if you just peel it like this, you can actually separate them. So that's going to be my two individual cables. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to do is put these connectors onto these sections of cable, and I'm not going to cut these to length until after these are on, because sometimes, you know, you're not sure how much you're actually going to cut away from the end just to connect this. I need to strip the ends of these wires and get these ready by unscrewing the back, and you can see there's just two pins there. So what I'll actually do is twist the ends of these wires into two and then poke them in the ends of these and just put a bit of solder on them. And you've just got to remember that the thicker one is the ground and the thin one is the signal. So if you watch my next video, you'll hear me talk about how I accidentally pulled off this connector when disassembling the headphones. So a trick to avoid that is just to tie a knot in the end of the cable like this, so that when you slide the connector over there, if you pull the wire, it won't actually come through. So once you've soldered these on, you won't be able to accidentally pull the cable and break the solder joints. Alright, so I've got the wires just sitting in there now, and I'm heating up my soldering iron, and I'm going to drop some solder in there. Fine, no matter how you see it, the solder smoke will go directly towards your face, no matter what. So now I'll do the other one. Okay, now this part's going to get confusing to do with left-right stuff, because you remember before I said that I worked it out so that the white and the shield on this were the shield, and that the blue is the right and that the red is the left. Now this is different to what's generally on the Sennheisers, which is that the red is the right and the black is the left. So I want to keep it consistent with what you can see from the headphones. So this red connector will be on the right and this blue connector will be on the left, sorry. The only difference is that The blue on this cable is the right. So it just means that I need to connect this red of this one onto the blue here, and the blue of this one onto the red here. Now, to make things even more confusing, generally on HD25s, the cable comes down on the right hand side. So on your right ear is where the cable comes down. But I prefer to have it coming from my left side. I'm not sure why, but it's just a preference. So I'm actually going to swap them around so that the left is the short cable and the right is the long cable. You can see this is the original cable. The length of the left is really long and the length of the right is really short. But I'm swapping them around. So I've made the blue one the length of the red one, and I've made the red one the length of the black one. Blue has to connect to this red, and this red has to connect to this blue, and the white and shield will both go to the shield of these two. So I'm going to just basically splice them together and twist them around so that they're ready to be soldered. Okay, so now I've just twisted the cables together, so the red going to blue and blue going to red, and the two grounds are all sort of just twisted together in the middle. So this is going to be the tricky part, just solder them together to make sure there's a good enough connection. And then I'll have to put some tape in there and stuff to make sure that they don't touch each other, and seal the whole thing up with some heat shrink, which I've already put onto the cable. And then I should be able to just clamp it into the headphones and test if it works. So I'm not sure if you could tell, but it was quite difficult to do that because with these really fine cables, they have like a fine sort of fabric and stuff mixed in between the fibers of the copper, which just means that it's really hard to get a clean solder because you're melting a lot of plastic and this fiber sort of material. But it looks like it's joined, so I'm going to test it out. Just going to test it. Dangling all over my face, but that's all right. Seems to be working fine, so that means I can clean it up. Okay, so now I've, as you can see, just put tape around the individual wires just so that they're not going to touch each other. And it looks pretty ugly, but it's all going to be covered anyway. I'm going to slide this heat shrink over the whole lot. It's pretty tight, and I just want to get it far enough up that you can't see the tape anymore. Alright, that looks good. I can just get my lighter. And like I said before, it's going to go a bit black because of the gas of the lighter, but I can just wash it off, so it doesn't matter. That's all shrunk, and it's on there nice and tight. This is the part that's going to get clamped into the side of the headphones. So this is the bottom. Just going to find a good spot to clamp it, which I think is probably there, right over where everything joins together. Because if it clamps it all in place, as long as it's working, they shouldn't move around. And I'll have the heat shrink overlapping on both sides. So just put the screws through. Just going to straighten this up before I tighten it. Looks pretty good. Alright. Now I can put it back on the actual headphones. So I'll slide this in here. Just check which is the bigger hole. So it goes this way. And the red, actually I might plug it in on this side first, so I know how much slack to give it. I put these right at the bottom. Just press it into the slot. There we go. So now I've got the cable on the left side, which is what I wanted, and the blue means is the left, it's normally black, and the red is on the right. I've got enough slack here on both sides. I can move this side if it's a little bit too long, and I can just test them out. Left, right, it's working. So do I enjoy doing something like this? The process is kind of fiddly and annoying. I would prefer not to do it. The way I wanted it to be set up doesn't really exist as a product that you can buy, so I kind of did it out of necessity because I wanted the cable to be on the left and I wanted to have a red cable just because I thought it would be cool. but most importantly, I wanted to have a 90-degree connector, but still have the possibility to have this 3.5mm. So I can plug that into my phone if I want to, or I can plug this in like this. The other advantage of doing it like this, which I forgot to mention, when you have a right angle connector, whether or not you're plugged in with the 6.5 or the 3.5, if for some reason, say you're DJing and you walk too far away from the mixer and you pull on it, you're going to pull that and it can't move anywhere. It's like if you've got a straight connector and you pull on it, it'll pull it out. But if it's at a right angle like this, it can't come out. So basically there's one point of failure here, and that's the cable. And that could be the reason why this original one got damaged in the first place, is from tugging on it by moving my head or walking too far away from the mixer or something, and it meant that the cable broke. And that's fixed with a straight connector like this, because if you pull on it, it just pulls out. But I don't like the straight connector like this because it gets in the way. So with this, if I walk too far away from the mixer and pull on it, it's going to pull these two apart. So it's kind of like a built-in safety mechanism, which is something that I like as well. And that was the reason why I decided to put it in line, as well as the fact that you just can't buy these connectors with the adapter on there. So that's the reason why I made it custom. Otherwise I would just buy it finished, because it's annoying to have to do this, but being able to do it means that now I have it exactly the way I want it. So if you want to do the same, give it a go, learn how to solder. If you've got any questions, ask me, but no, I'm not going to do it for you because I don't like doing it.